This lecture is about red blood cells. I'm going to try to start by drawing one right here. They're somewhat of a circle, and you don't have to draw a perfect circle because they're really not perfect. Many red blood cells are pretty kind of banged up and dented in and so on and so forth. And some are a little oblong shaped, but by and large they're kind of circled. I didn't draw another circle in the center here because it's not a ring like that, and it's also not a nucleus. What it is that this center part of the red blood cell sort of dented on both sides. Many textbooks refer to that as being biconcave. They like dent in like this. So this is like a top view, and this is like a side view. If we took this and flipped it sideways, it'd look like this. And of course they'd be red because of what they carry, which is hemoglobin and oxygen. So this is a red blood cell, and it's often called an erythrocyte. And what this means is cyte, the suffix cyte again means cell, and erythro simply means red, and I believe that's Greek. Their job is primarily just this. They carry O2. They're carrying oxygen. And they do that because they're loaded down with a protein called hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin is a pretty complex protein, and it's got a lot of these little things called heme subunits in them, and it's got these. It's a protein, so it's made of amino acids. It takes roughly this shape here. That's supposed to be hemoglobin. Here's the ball and stick model showing you all of the different amino acids therein. And there are these little heme subunits in it that you can't see here. And I forget if I did this or not the other day. Evidently not. But and each of these little heme subunits have iron at the center, and that's where the oxygen's held. And the red blood cells are also responsible for blood type. RBC is responsible for blood type for reasons that we'll talk about in the lecture tomorrow. In addition, let's take a look here. There is no nucleus. These cells don't have a nucleus. White blood cells are the only ones in your bloodstream that have a nucleus. And I seem to be a fan of these sliding scales, so let's do one of those. This time we're not putting the middle section in. We're going to call normal anything from here forward. Even though I'm going to put on the end here too many, and down here too few. Well, how in the world can too many still be considered normal? For the most part, your body has the ability, and I'm sure in some rare instances it doesn't, to get rid of the excess, as it's always doing that anyway. Body removes excess of these cells, so you're not going to end up with a whole surplus of these cells. There's two organs that are pulling red blood cells out of circulation constantly. The spleen is doing so and breaking them down and recycling the iron in them, and so is your liver. So if you have to have your spleen removed for whatever reason, the liver still does the job. But then there's this line here. That line is the line that you cannot donate blood if you do not go over this line. You don't have that many red blood cells. Anything on this side of the line down is considered anemia. And that simply means not enough red blood cells. Now, there can be a number of causes for this, and a lot of times it's just a result of not getting enough iron in your diet. That's not in every case, but in a lot of cases it is. We cannot manufacture iron because iron is an element. Anything on the periodic table, we do not have the capacity to manufacture at all. Our bodies can't make it. Those are like the Legos of the universe. We can build lots of stuff out of those Legos, but we have to put those Legos into our body to be used. So, in people with anemia, the main symptoms are weakness and lethargy. Lethargy is a fancy word for tired and low on energy and things like that. Let's talk for a moment then about this hemoglobin. Hemoglobin. I'm going to abbreviate that HG, capital H and capital G, because if we do capital H, little g, that's the chemical symbol for mercury, so I don't want you to confuse those two. This is the complex protein that I just showed you, responsible for absorbing oxygen. There are approximately 280 million of these in every single red blood cell. That's a lot. Let's go back up to the top of this so I can show you this number. On average, 25 trillion of these. So that would be 1,000, million, billion, trillion, 25 trillion. In the average person. And again, the average person has about 5.6 liters of blood, but it varies from person to person. So some people are going to have way more than that too. And each and every one of those 25 trillion cells is going to have 280 million hemoglobin molecules in it, each of them absorbing oxygen. When it does, there are two types of hemoglobin. There's one called oxyhemoglobin, which is O2 attached, and it's bright red. If you've ever bled, you've seen oxyhemoglobin. Okay. Then there is something called deoxyhemoglobin. There is no O2 attached, and it is dark red. Oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin. That's really the only difference. If you've ever donated blood, you notice the blood that leaves your veins looks a lot darker because it has not been in contact with oxygen. As a result, it's darker in color. But even if you bleed out of a vein, you still see it as bright red because as soon as it leaves your body, it hits the air, touches oxygen, and becomes oxygenated. So that's the gist on that. Now, I mentioned that blood types are the result of this, and I do want to talk about blood types in our next lecture, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it today except to say blood types. And what they are basically A, B, and O are the result of proteins on the surface of red blood cells. So in addition to this protein on the surface of the red blood cell, there's other ones as well that are going to determine the blood types and what can mix. More specifically, these proteins are called antigens. And that's pretty good for today. We'll pick up tomorrow talking about in the next lecture talking about these blood types and how they work and how they interact with one another.